Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of the World Report. I'm here with my guest, Seira.
Hi, welcome. Welcome myself.
And we are going to discuss Saudi Arabia today.
Yeah.
So, Seira, what do you know about Saudi Arabia?
So, I don't know a huge amount, Alex. Are you Alex on this podcast? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I do know is that over the past century, the United States, it has developed a really strange and peculiar relationship with this nation, especially in wake of our more strict policies towards Middle East and Muslim majority nations. Our relationship with Saudi Arabia sometimes can stand out to me as a weird exception to a lot of our foreign policy rules.
Definitely. Them and Israel as well.
And Israel, yes. Absolutely Israel as well.
Yeah, we kind of let our allies in the Middle East get away with a lot more.
That's very true.
We should.
And it I don't know if I've been told that begs the question is not the right phrase, but I'm going to use it anyways. It begs the question, are we really that secure in our policies? A lot of people talk about the Middle East, and the first thing that comes up is oil. And there's a reason first thing that comes up is oil, and it's because it feels like our policies are internally inconsistent. In a lot of ways, like, we're into the Middle East in an almost sort of invasive sense in a lot of ways, but we're willing to make exceptions for the few nations that, sort of cave to us.
Yeah.
It's worth mentioning Bin Laden was Saudi, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And he's from a rich, big Saudi family. So,
yeah, his father was an architect,
yes.
Very famous architect in the Middle East. Had 40 children.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting that sort of the big icon of Islamophobia for the last, whether or not you feel that the actions taken to pursue Al-Qaeda were, too much or too little, whether you think that the war on terror is this or that, it's interesting to note that one of the biggest faces of terrorism, the biggest face, I'd argue, in the 21st century is from Saudi Arabia. And despite all this, we still have a pretty comfortable relationship with them.
Yeah, the terrorists are just generally people that take Islam to big extremes.
Yes.
It kind of crops up all over the place. I'm not defending what Saudi Arabia does, but I feel like the terrorism there is a separate issue from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that's true.
So today we're actually talking about U.S. relations with Saudi Arabia, which you went off on a little bit.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with the killing of Khashoggi.
Yeah, so
are you aware of this?
Yes, I am aware. Washington Post writer, I believe, former Saudi resident, went to the U.S. in self-imposed exile.
Not the U.S.
Not the U.S.
I think the embassy in Turkey.
No. Before then, in 2017.
Oh, okay.
Left Saudi Arabia to pursue his government-critical journalist career without, facing threats, and was pretty well connected there before he left. I was reading up on him. He actually had a stint working for the government. Clearly, he left because of his disagreements, and then he went to Turkey, the consulate in Turkey, for his wife.
Yes.
So he had a wife in Saudi Arabia that he wanted to make sure he was divorced from. And so he went to Turkey to do so.
And then he was murdered.
And then he disappeared, and I hope you can hear the quotes in my voice, because his body has not been found.
So it's according to who you listen to. If you listen to the FBI, he was murdered. If you listen to a certain president, it's impossible to know what happened.
Yeah. And if you listen to...
Saudi Arabia is a very nice country. They have very nice people.
And if you listen to Turkey, which, although it was the Saudi consulate, it happened in Turkey, they also have sort of a closer relationship with Saudi Arabia than maybe is comfortable. And they even still had to come to the conclusion that, yes, he was murdered, and yes, it was very likely ordered by the Crown Prince.
Yeah, that's the thing. Trump is kind of bending over backwards for the Crown Prince.
Yeah, in a big way.
He has a thing for strongmen.
Yes.
I don't mean it like that.
He's a big fan of... no, but you do have a point, is that Trump's foreign policy with these sometimes overly hostile nations seems to be much more one of subservience than one of, like, confrontation. And it's kind of breaking with tradition. Mm-hmm. You know, since World War II, we've really had a policy of sticking it to these world leaders. Ever since, you know, Truman came through and sort of froze over relationships with the USSR. We've kind of had, like, obviously legit cold relations with a lot of big leaders. Trump seems to be kind of throwing that away in favor of compromising, you know, even talking with China and even with North Korea.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I'm not against the North Korea talks. This is a little bit off topic, but I'm going to talk about it anyways.
Yeah, go ahead. It's the World Report.
What has the North Korean talks brought exactly? Like...
Fear. More fear.
Nothing.
Just more fear for us, yeah. It was touted as such an achievement, but it really hasn't gotten us any closer to dealing with them effectively.
Yeah. No, it really hasn't.
Which, like...
But it's probably going to get him reelected.
Yeah, because it's, in theory, a big step. Like, it seems like a really cool I'm a president thing to do, but a lot of people are going to look at what first happens and not really the aftermath, you know. You can have a talk with someone, but it doesn't, like, we have talks with world leaders all the time, and relations don't necessarily change.
Yeah.
We're not talking about, you know, China as much as we were when the talks were happening, because, you know, there's still a trade war going on.
The World Report. The World Report's talking about China.
The World Report's talking about China. Let's go. Yeah, but there's still a trade feud going on, trade war, whatever you want to call it, that is threatening not only the U.S. and China, but other nations as well. You know, there's a lot of... And then there's Ukraine. We don't need to get Ukraine.
Yeah.
So it's like there's a lot of global issues that kind of get swept under the rug once they first get brought up. Obviously, Ukraine is a really hot topic right now.
Yeah.
But, like, an impeachment inquiry can only go so far with partisan loyalty recently. So it's like... Eventually, we're going to have to talk about something else. And that lets a lot of these issues kind of slip under the rug.
Yeah.
Which I guess is kind of what the World Report is here for.
Kind of what Trump wants to do. He wants to slip it under the rug.
Yeah.
So, back to the topic. We got pretty off topic there. So, there's actually a historical reason why America tends to be so lenient in its policies towards Saudi Arabia. And that, believe it or not, is our military, not oil.
Okay.
Oil is part of it.
Oil's part of it, yeah.
But the military, at this point, I think, is a bigger part of it.
Okay, so talk about that.
So, in 1945, Saudi Arabia discovered oil in the grounds. Mm-hmm. And then they started trading that with everybody. Yeah. And then, fast forward to 83, I believe, the Muslim-Jewish War.
Yeah, I'm just here, like...
Arab-Israeli conflict, that's the proper name of it. It happened.
Muslim-Jewish War.
The U.S. backed Israel, obviously, them being our strongest ally. And Saudi Arabia retaliated with oil sanctions. They're like, no more oil for U.S.
Yeah.
Which
was interesting to note because it was a period where other nations like Iran were considering moves like, you know, maybe we should nationalize oil and stuff. So it's... I think the 80s... I hate to interrupt you, but I think the 80s were a time where U.S., like, Middle East relationships took a really different and interesting turn.
Yes, exactly. So, following 83, the war ended. Same year they put the sanctions in place. U.S. needed that oil. So, we decided to trade weapons and military personnel with Saudi Arabia and Iran, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Iran turned on us. Saudi Arabia is still an ally today. And they are one of the most important allies in the region because they are a vast country.
They're humongous.
They're pretty big in that region.
They're
close to Iraq and Syria. Mm-hmm. Both countries we're currently in conflicts with.
Mm-hmm. They're close to a lot of places as well, just because of how big they are.
Yeah, and oil is still a factor.
Yeah, I know.
You can't ignore that. So we kind of bend over backwards for them just for that reason. Mm-hmm. Like, we have a lot of military personnel in there. We want to keep those bases there. However, I feel like our policies have weakened so much to the point that BSB...
Oh, I'm sorry. That's an alarm.
That MSB,
MBS. MBS. So I guess we should explain.
Crown Prince MBS.
Crown Prince MBS.
Very long name.
The Crown Prince has a super long name. MBS is Mohammed bin Salman, and it's just super long beyond that. So everyone calls him MBS, and that's what we'll be calling him, or the Crown Prince.
Yeah. So MBS feels emboldened by the Khashoggi killing. He feels like he can get away with anything because I think at this point he can.
Yeah, and that's really scary to consider because
they're not nice people.
No, and the Khashoggi killings were Saudi played it up for a while. They said, no, it wasn't us. And then they said, okay, well,
they admitted to it.
He did die, and it was us. And then eventually they were like, okay, it was us. What are you going to do about it? And at that point, they said that because they realized they had nothing to lose. They know nothing can really be done about it. These relationships are so intertwined that, it would take a leader with a little more backbone to really tell them, this is not okay. But it's one in a long tradition of MBS silencing people, taking increased political prisoners. It's interesting to see the coverage of him as a more progressive leader, with the reforms for women. If y'all didn't see, I think it was in 2015 or something, women were given the ability to legally drive for
pretty big.
It was huge, right? Because in a lot of Middle East Muslim majority nations, that's still a long way off to consider. And that was part of a lot of progressive reform coming in from MBS when he came into power. But, that is all sort of underlined by a current of taking political prisoners, silencing journalists, and obviously the killing of Khashoggi. So it's interesting to see the way MBS sort of, you know what I mean? He plays two different sides of the coin, is what I'm trying to say.
I think he just plays the evil coin, actually.
Yeah.
I feel like he's women can drive, gays can't exist, though.
Yeah.
Also, if you criticize me, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah. So it's I feel like he's making concessions to the progressive-minded people in Saudi Arabia to get them to hush up.
Maybe. I think that sounds right.
Yeah, and it also signals so that a place like the U.S. can say, oh yeah, they might stone gays to death, but women can drive,
pretty good.
So they're on their way, and that's not really true.
No,
they're not approaching any progressive goal. They're just making concessions to the people they need to.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we are running out of time.
Yeah.
Seira, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Next week, we will be talking about the Belt and Road Initiative with Charles. So that's exciting.
Awesome.
So see you, everybody.
See you around.
Have a great day.